All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Sankofa Video and Books. My name is Michaela, and it's my pleasure to host you today for this most amazing event, which is the celebration of the release of Holy Lotus. Starting to improv already. Okay. Excuse me, sir.
Serious.
Excuse me, sir. I love your animation. We're just trying to have a event up here. Yeah, no problem. Anyway, it's my pleasure to introduce you to the man of the hour, Joshua Myers, along with his conspirator, Mr. A.B. Spellman. I'll start with Mr. A.B. Spellman. He's one of the founding voices of the Black arts movement, a poet, music critic, magazine editor, and arts administrator. Spellman is a recent winner of a Grammy for classical compendium for his work as an orator on passion for Bach and culturing. His poetry books include The Beautiful Days and Things I Must Have Known. His 4 Lives in Bebop Business. Okay. His 4 Lives in Bebop Business, a collective treatment of jazz artists Ornette Coleman, Herbie Nichols, Cecil Taylor, and Jackie McLean, has inspired generations of Black music writers. Returning to full-time poet after his retirement as a legendary arts administrator at the National Endowment for the Arts, Spellman has 2 forthcoming volumes of poetry, including Between the Nights and Its Music, due out for Wesleyan University, pressed in October. Joshua Myers is a writer and a professor of Africana Studies at Howard University. The author of previous works, We Are Worth Fighting For, Cedric Robinson, The Time of the Black Radical Tradition, and A Black Study, Holy Lotus is his first collection of poetry and the winner of the Naomi Long Madgett Poetry Prize, sponsored by Broadside Lotus Press, the oldest Black press devoted to the publication of poetry, merging from Dudley Randall's Broadside Press and Madgett's Lotus Press. In addition to editing a Gathering Together literary journal, Myers writes for Downbeat magazine and contributes to DC's Capital Bach. So the next thing we're going to move on to is a reading, hopefully by Mr. A.B. Spellman, if you would so grace us. And can we get a round of applause for maybe one for this? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I love being introduced. Okay, you hear me well, everyone? I guess you do since no one's complaining.
Sister
All right, I want to say first of all that I'm really honored to be invited to participate in this event, inaugurating Josh Myers' wonderful collection of poetry, which I hope you all buy. You will benefit from it if you do. It's very fine work and an inauguration of a new voice in African American and American poetry. Having said that, I've been at it for a few times longer than Josh has. So the first poem I'm going to read is from about 1962, 63. That's how old I am. And it's called The Twist. And this is my new collection of poems that is from all periods of my work. So it's going back to the very earliest stuff when I was in New York, participating in the downtown art scene. And this poem is called The Twist. A dancer's world is walls, movement confined, music, God's last breath, rhythm, the last beating of his heart. A dancer follows that sound, blind to its source, toward walls with others. She cannot dance alone. She thinks of thought as windows, as ice around the dance. Can you break it? Move. All right. In 1967,
I left New York and moved to Atlanta, where I met my wife, Karen Edmund Spellman. I was on a tour with Four Poets, touring historically black colleges for weeks of residency there, and I stopped in Pascal's restaurant, and there was Julian Bond sitting there, and I had asked Baraka who I could talk to since I was going to be in Atlanta for a week, and he said, look up Julian Bond, and there it was. So I went over to talk to him, and next to him was this really gorgeous woman. And I mean, I hate to objectify her, but speaking of that way, but she really was stunning to look at. And so after I talked to Julian for a minute, she invited me to stop by the SNCC office. She was in SNCC that afternoon. I said, okay, this is promising. And I stopped by thinking I was going to have a conversation with the staff about political aesthetics or something like that, and see if I could talk to this beautiful woman and having dinner with me. And what she did when I walked into her office was she said, let me see now, you're one of those New York poets, aren't you? And I said, well, yeah, I'm from New York and I'm a poet. She said, well, what can a New York poet do? And we thought hard about that because it was kind of hard to come up with an answer. And she said, well, I bet you know how to collate, don't you? And I said, well, yes, I can collate. She took me into a little room, and there was this table and all these stacks of paper and a stapler. And then she said, okay, collate this. And that's what she did. That was my conversation with the staff about political aesthetics right there. And, you know, I think she brought me a glass of water, and we went and had dinner that evening. And we've been married since 1967, and it's all been good. Wow. You know? I'm going to read her a love poem a little bit later. I thought she was going to be here, but she's at home supervising some laborers. Okay. All right, this poem was the poem I wrote at that time in 1968. I should give you the glosses. The names that are mentioned in the poem are mostly SNCC workers. I've mentioned Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman, whom most of you should know, were 3 Corps workers who were murdered in Mississippi, and their bodies were discarded, and there was a big search to find them later. It was sort of a turning point in the movement. And I mentioned Walter Cronkite. Most of you are too young to know who Walter Cronkite. He was the CBS News anchor. And I mentioned what did I mention? South Carolina State, Orangeburg, South Carolina. That's where Voorhees State College is. And you know about the killings of the Trent State College. The state troopers marched on campus and murdered students. Well, that happened several times on historically black campuses. One of which was Voorhees State in South Carolina. So I mentioned that. Okay. When black people are with each other, we sometimes fear ourselves and whisper over our shoulders about unmentionable acts, and sometimes we fight and lie. These are some things we sometimes do. And when alone, I sometimes walk from wall to wall, fighting visions of white men fighting me, and black men fighting white men and fighting me. And I lose myself between walls and ricocheting shots, and can't say for certain who I have killed or been killed by. It is the fear of winter passing and summer coming, and the killing I have called for coming to my door saying, hit it, AB, you're in it too. And the white army moves like thieves in the night, mass producing beautiful black corpses and then stealing them away. While my frequent death watches me from Orangeburg on Cronkite, and I'm oiling my gun and cooking my food and saying, when the time comes, to myself, over and over, hopefully. But I remember driving from Atlanta to Birmingham with Stone and Featherstone and Cleve, and Feather talked about dueling a pair of Klansmen. And Cleve told how they hunted Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman's bodies through the haunted hours and the silver nights of the Mississippi swamp, while a runaway survivor from Orangeburg slept between wars on the back seat. Times like this are times when black people are with each other and the strength flows back and forth between us like borrowed breath. This is the point about getting older. That's something I'm doing these days. I'm in my 88th year now. I have to tell you, my late 80s are swinging. You know, I won a Grammy this year. Hey. And I'm more prolific and a better poet than I've ever been. And I've got a new book coming out in October, which I hope Santa's wonderful face will be good enough to host me for a reading for it. And I got the next manuscript almost ready for the book after that. So I'm swinging. I'm happy. So there it is. However, I would trade 50 years with anybody who wanted. All right, this is called Groovin' Low. I mean, hipsters in the room will recognize that as a pun on Dizzy Gillespie's tune Groovin' High. But whatever Dizzy was talking about, I'm talking about getting older. My swing is more mellow these days, not the hard bop drive I used to roll, but more of a cool foxtrot. My eyes still close when the rhythm locks. I've learned to boogie with my feet on the floor. I'm still moving, still grooving, still falling in love. I bop to the bass line now. The trap set paradiddles, radimacues, and flams that used to spin me in place still set me off. But I bop to the bass line now. I enter the tune from the bottom up and let trumpet and sax squeal above me. So don't look for me in the treble. Don't look for me in the fly staccato splatter of the hot young horn, no. You'll find me in the nuance, hanging out in inflection and slur. I'm the one executing the half-bent dip and the slow drag with the smug little smile and the really cool shades. So that's what aging is like. Here's a poem for a very good friend of mine, the playwright and novelist Pearl Clegg. She's a very old friend, and I'm glad her name is known to you. So I don't have to explain who she is. She is a feminist writer, as you know, and this is about that. It's called, she's sort of ragged me a few times for having sesquipedalian tendencies. If you don't know that word, it means a person who likes to show off their vocabulary by using big words unnecessarily. And so that's what the title is. It's called Four Episodes with Gnomic Appendices. Okay. The gnomic appendices are little lines at the end of each section where I make a comment on writing. Pearl is frowning into her monitor. The squint of her eyes tells you she is worried, but it's her ear that's got her down. The pitch of her prose is flat. She's drawn her people well enough. They have names, complexions, styles of dress, places to live and go, but their voices are off key. Their lyrics do not swing. They live against their backgrounds and not inside it. Pearl can't admit that the characters she's made so lovingly have tricked her so cunningly. They con her into a trap that she cannot escape. The oblique state of almost life, where her words glance off the real but do not penetrate it. Pearl knows that she should walk away, just back out of these people who refuse to inflame no matter how hard she breathes on them. Oh shit, she sees it now. She's in the wrong person. In first person now, Pearl's bopping hard. She's typed so hard her knuckles hurt, and her keyboard now is blowing tunes where people make a sort of rhythm section under her in the way they improvise their lines and moves. The ominous man stirs attention into the flow, even when he's not in the room. The older woman keeps them all on the one. Eddie, when he enters, will be a tenor saxophone, the tessitura Pearls prefers and her lovers. Then Ava will lean into the mic and croon with him. Their recitation will confect into a ballad of delicate passion and staying close. Writing is living strong in the first person, in the revolutionary method of bebop. You make your phrases new, you swing hard through the changes, you break down the blues. 2. Pearl and Zarin are sitting in a gazebo 40 steps from where high tide has moved the beach. It's pouring down rain, but there are holes in the clouds that let streams of sunlight drizzle through. She is in loose beige diaphone. Z is shoeless and shirtless in a white linen suit that blackens his mahogany skin. They have a jug of rum and something between them. Pearl is laughing hard. Z is conducting a story with his cigar. It is, of course, a lie, but a true one. As Pearl remonstrates with her balletic hands, a slow wind blowing east picks up their laughter and starts its pelagic journey to the homeland shore. You can't write love if you don't have love. Both parts of this truism are hard to pull off. Pearl is in the kitchen. This is not where she lives. The Laurys and Penates that guard her pantry have few duties and must amuse themselves with the creatures of imagination that she and Z emit. But there's a thing she does with chicken breasts and mozzarella that she's proud of, and friends will be here soon. It's a housewoman moment she enjoys for now, but do not engrave this image on your memory. Pearl believes no butter and batter can make a woman strong, and to commit to them will leave her issues intact. She fears that the universal sister mind she wants to forge would etiolate into invisibility if locked inside the home. No, she must take her causes to the page where she can brew them and stew them and serve them up to us. Writing is wanting peace, but knowing better. 4. Pearl and Degnan are walking through the West End's winter funk. It's a gray day, but the breeze is soft, the magnolia's fat leaves stubbornly green. Degnan is in her last trimester. Dee in bloom is more femme than ever, and to her credit, she remains secure in her beauty. The grand camber of her body now laminated in that lucent skin that glitters for a women so. Pearl is humming Aretha. She has stopped advice for this moment since she carried Dee, and is now about to break it out. But in the way of the young, Dee thinks herself wise. No matter, Pearl will lay it on her anyway. They smile, I know more than you think smiles to each other, the signature countenance of mother-daughter love, and it is cool. Wisdom, after all, is more for broadcast than for use, which is writing. Music's other voice hummed in the key of C. Writing is where wisdom goes to sing. I'm going to take my glasses off. They are off. All right. This poem is called Oriki. I wrote a poem for I have 2 daughters. The older one is Toyin, who is a musician, and she was on a recording we made that had some success this year. The younger one name is Kaji. But this Oriki is an Oriki is a ceremony wherein the first voice a Yoruba child hears is we will call him a griot, the elder who knows the tribe stories and histories and all, and he will sing to her quietly her private name, her secret name, her name of power, and that's what it's Oriki. The form is actually a Scots form that I got from a poet named Kathleen Rain. Okay, Oriki. Into your ear I sing a name, and from that name there runs a line. And on that run, ancestors chant, the elders dance, they build to you. From their mantra, a rose exhales, a summer scent to cover you. Within you, there uncoils the line, woman to man, to first made child, to horizons beyond my sight, where settling light enwraps the cold. And in that light, two hungry souls combine to dream you a name. And in their dream, their love makes you. Then from you there combusts a shout. Around that shout there turns a ring. A stomp propounds a jubilee. In jubilee, the ancients teach. A people rise, a people fall. We fall and rise, and each new hand will sculpt the shape of all the world. You have that force. It fires your smile. It fires your fury. Fires the song I sing to you. That you can be is miracle enough for me. Poet pauses to drink some water. All right, I'm going to read a love poem. Love poems are kind of out of style, I think. I don't see them anywhere anymore. And I like them. I'm so old school, I mean, but they're really hard to write because you want them to be true. You don't want them to sound like pickup lines. And it's hard to get that sometimes because you kind of want to fly, but you can't let yourself fly. Otherwise, you get kind of jive in it. So here it is. This is called The Truth About Karen. I'll say that my wife, several people in the room know her and would know this, but she is a great event planner, or was. I mean, age is getting to her too. But she's put on these major events, and she's very, very good at organizing things. It's some of the skills she got from SNCC. So she, when her colleague in SNCC, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Toure, was facing death, which he faced very bravely and with great strength. And he decided he wanted his death to be celebrated with a unity meeting of people from all elements of the Black movement, from the NAACP all the way through the Farrakhan. And my wife was entrusted with organizing this event for him when all these people met. And in their encomiums to Stokely, they did pledge unity. So that was a pledge that wasn't really kept that well, but anyway, they pledged it. That is referred to in this poem. It's called The Truth About Karen. Here in the solitude of distance, I see you clearer. You are carrying your mission to the door. This time is Stokely's last painful year you're saving by sculpting a memory of fraternity and revolution he can carry into a champion's death in Africa. Now you are in your garden amid herbs, azaleas, and shrubs. It is not a pristine patch. There are weeds among the blooms. I won't fatten the metaphor of this snapshot, no aesthetic of the imperfect or seeding of blossoms in the urban, etc. It is enough that the theme of your incessant busyness is to find some funky thing and make it better. Even in sleep, you are never still. Beneath that woman is the tender you, the one I breathed with. The passage to her opens to the lightest touch. Her transparency in the nightlight breaks on a soft-blown kiss. I know that you better than you. She is far deeper than her moans in the night. She is the love before birthing, the proof of the question, music that makes the darkness live. My love, I am not a weak man, but I could not stand up without your care. When I'm in the bar's disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I call on the fool in you, who calls on the fool in me, and makes me whole. In the clarity of absence, I know that yours is not a quiet beauty. It compels and has a radiance we who love you stand inside of and are home. I meant to embarrass her with that poem today. I was going to spring it on her, and she was going to blush. Reading with one Howard professor, I feel like I should read a poem about another Howard professor, one who James Early I know knew very well, and his name was Scudder. Scudder, for those of you who don't know him and his work, was a very great painter. I don't know that he will ever get the credit he deserves because he was a great world master. He is in collections with Museum of Modern Art and the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. So he has had some recognition, but he never got the recognition he deserved. He was very influential, started a whole school of contemporary Ethiopian art, and several of those artists are having some success today, people he trained while he was here at Howard. Scudder went to Paris in his early adulthood and participated at the tail end of the negritude movement. And I mentioned in this poem about that some of the major poets, Césaire, Senghor, and Diop, had gone back home, had left Paris by then. I do mention that. I don't think any of the other glosses need to be specified for you. Scudder. So there you were in Paris, wishing you'd arrived in time to hang with Senghor, Césaire, and Diop. But they'd suspended poetry and gone home to Senegal, Martinique, and Guinea to govern or nag government to dig funnels away from the colonials. Yet there was enough negritude left among their roiling progeny to feed one Ethiop seer searching Paris for places for your eye to settle. Your luggage stuffed with image and icons, symbols, designs, colors, shapes, and sounds of Africa, seen and heard from fat windows of Axum and Lalibela, part cop, pre-roster, you with the wisdom of griots, the tender dialectic of the Dogon who planted a seed for every burial, the song of Mali, polyphonic yodels of entire village of the Bahumankuli of the Ituri forest, and counterpoint as elaborate as a Bach chorale, and then the deep bass harmonies of the Zulu, who stomped as they blew, and the drum carved from the blessed tree, and the art of Benin and Fulani and more, all jostling inside your trunk, awaiting your application in Paris with the poets gone home. If one put Marx and Freud in a bowl and stirred and baked for 7 years, would one confect a new mind? Frost with negritude, infused with juju, decorate with the 500 letters of the Amharic alphabet, would that mind be brown and chant the thunder and dreams of the lost and more than lost people of dance and drum? We tour his canvas. There is a snake, as everyone respects a snake. Now the snake is a river, perhaps the Nile. Its powers are manifold and mostly benign. The landscape it describes is populated with the transparent fauna of the master, who paints from the mind and not from the eye. Now there is a bird, as everyone loves a bird. Her wings are flared whether she stands or flies. She flashes her potency. Her image decorates nothing. I've come to know her muted song. I have her surveying a field of cracked eggs in which a brood of cruel fell hatchlings scream to be fed Vietnamese meat. Her breast sports the stars and stripes. I cannot write with jazz in the room. Yardbird Parker and John Coltrane inhabit my brain and hold it in a state of left wonderment, far above the naked empire of words. But Scudder could mambo his brush across the canvas and swear that train and birds swung his creatures outward and filled them with the sacred juju, that great music turned up all the way cannot be loud. That's why I'd rather be a painter than a poet. But then I'd rather play a horn than be either. The thing about booze is it takes its time when it comes to enslave you. It tickles a room full of friends for you, suspends all the stress in your body, grants you dreamless sleep against the arrogant entitlement of nightmares. Booze is greedy, but never could kill the light of the juju and splendor. The things about booze is it makes you lost in your hours when you secretly know you are killing yourself. The thing about booze is it loves you. An essay on the myth of universality. The only thing universal in human existence is the death that came too soon for Skunda. The critic's bona fides is a begged question, that one eye can see all and know the worth of all art, or one ear can hear what swings in all music, or even one music is epistemological imperialism. Write it down, Early. I'll say it again. The critic's bona fides is a begged question, that one eye can see it all and know the worth of all art, or one ear can hear what swings in all music, or even one music is epistemological imperialism, as this plural world has plural standards. No one who listens to music close enough to be moved by it is ever wrong, no matter how much I hate that goddamn band. The 5 people who guard the gate to wealth and glory in the art plantation are smug in the eye, can see the micro dots, the quarks, the hemiquavers of the picture, but they can't see Skunda's serpent song, even as it saturates my senses. It is because they miss that vibration in the echo, the one that tells of the ancestral Africa their forefathers saw as a mole to rape and not a place to be humble before. The critic has no right to be wrong. And so, sweet little man with the aquiline nose and the paint caught forever under your nails and the laughter brewing on your tongue, now you are among the ancestors you chanted to. Sangor and Cesar and Diop are there to show you the hippest spots of that perfect Harlem of the stars. And your demons are left behind to commute between your pictures and our dreams. Okay, I've got a little time. All right, this the title of my next book is Between the Night and Its Music, and this is the poem from which that title derives. Between the night, between the night and its shadow, between the night and its music, rather. Between the night and its shadow is the music. Between the music and the night is the song. Between the song and the music is the voice. Between the voice and the music is the self. Between the self and its song is the melody. Between the song and its melody is the rhythm. Between the rhythm and the melody is the mind. Between the mind and its song is the word. Between the word and the mind is the voice. Between the voice and the word is the thought. Between the thought and the voice is the self. Between the word and the self is the shadow. Between the shadow and the self is the light. Between the light and the word is the music. The song is the melody and the word in the rhythm. The self holds the mind to the word and the thought of the song. The voice in the song sings the self to the mind. The light lights the shadow of the voice and its melody. The rhythm moves itself through the dimming night song. The thought in the song is of night shadows without music. I mean that. All right. Okay. I think I've. Okay. All right. This is my funeral poem. It's called After Vallejo, after the Afro-Peruvian poet Cesar Vallejo, who died about 1929, I think. Often said to be a surrealist poet, though I don't find him so. He wrote a poem that began with the line, "I will die in Paris on a rainy day." And so I stole that line, so I thought I'd give him credit in the title. I will die in Havana in a hurricane. It will be morning. I'll be facing southwest, away from the Gulf, away from the storm, away from home, looking to the virid hills of Matanzas, where the Orisha rise, lifted by congueros and masks of iron, bongoceros and masks of fire, timbaleros and masks of water, by all the clave that binds the rhythms of this world. I'll be writing when I go, revising another hopeful survey of my life. I will die of nothing that I did, but all that I did not do. I promised myself a better self than I could make, and I will not forgive. You will be there, complaining that I never saved you, that I left you where you live, standing in your own green dream. When you come for me, come singing, no dirge, but scat my eulogy in bebop code. Sing that I died among gods, but lived with no God and did not suffer for it. Find one true poem that I made and sing it to my shade as it fades into the wind. Sing it presto in 4/4 time in the universal ghetto key of B flat. I will die in Havana in rhythm. Tumbao, Montuno, Guaguanco, dense strata of rhythm pulsing me away. And the mother of waters will say to the saint of crossroads, well, damn, he danced his way out after all.
I mean, the last one, I think that's the perfect segue, because the title of my collection is Holy Ghost Key. And I got that from one of the great living musicians, Corey Henry. And he said B flat is the Holy Ghost key.
Yeah.
And so
this is the first point.
Yeah. And I don't know enough about music theory to understand that, but I do understand spirit. And there's a thing that happens when sound attaches to spirit. And that's where the spirit of this collection derives. And so I want to start, by thanking everyone for being here. Of course, thanking Sankofa. This is my 4th book. All of my 4 books have been launched at Sankofa. There's something about, please. There's something about, being home, taking care of home, understanding a place as home. And I always say this is more home to me than the place that I actually work. I'm across the street. And that's because things like this happen here in an organic way, right? A lot of the works, that I come to do comes through this relation. And so thank you for being who you are, Sankofa. Even though I tried to not have a lunch this time. So I want to start, thank you, AB, for that. It was wonderful reading. And, you said how much time? It's like, you can have all the time, really. But I want to start with a different sensory experience. The cover of this collection was designed by Zalika Ibarimi. Yes, please. Black studies scholar, artist. And I didn't give her any direction. She read the collection, and this is what she saw. And, this idea of a window looking into something, and this, her reading of the spirituality that's embedded in the text, and then her drawing from her own spiritual practices and her own artistic practices to, complete a vision. And this cover is a part of a series of images that she developed. And those images, I thought, what would happen if I were to put them to life or to bring them to another kind of life? And I have no experience doing this, and so it was an act of faith. And earlier this year, we actually translated her art to the screen. And so I want to start with that sensory experience. Michaela, when you're ready, let me know. But this is a derivation of a derivation of the collection. And so it comes from Zalika's reading, and then it comes from my reading of Zalika and my interpretation of Zalika through film. And this is called There's a Sweet, Sweet Spirit. Huh? 2 minutes? All right. I don't think I have any 2-minute jokes. This is an interesting room. I don't know, there are a lot of elders, my elders, there are a lot of writers as well. And so I say that because I also see my students. And it's always important to know where you are and know who's around you. And being able to connect to some of the other writers in the room is going to be very important. I wrote this book in large measure, really, AB, I'm sure you remember this. 2017, you were interviewing James Phillips and Nelson Stevens over at the Potter's House. I met Karen first. That's really important context. Karen brought me into the work of the SNCC Legacy Project and Black Power Chronicles, and she hasn't let me go since. It's been 8 years of doing whatever Karen says. And, you said it used to be a great, continues to be a great organizer. A lot of what I learned from organizing coming from her and her influence. And so, absolutely, she continues that. But we were interviewing people who were in the Black arts, Black Power movement in DC or connected to DC. And you were interviewing James and Nelson, and James said something that, it brought me back to Aski Muhammad Touré. So Aski Muhammad Touré was the first person who I met that had seen John Coltrane play. I was probably 22, 23 years old. And his entire world, once that conversation shifted, that his entire world stopped. And he started to cry when the memory came back. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is happening? And ever since that moment, anybody that mentions having experienced Coltrane has that same reaction. Maybe not crying, but there's an emotional overload. Yeah, please.
I wrote a long autobiographical poem that was in my last collection called The First 70. Mm-hmm. It's a very long poem. The longest section by far in that poem was hearing Coltrane at Thelonious Monk at the 5 Spot in 1957. Mm-hmm. It was by far the longest section, so it weighed out as the most important thing in the poem, therefore the most important thing in my life.
Absolutely. Wow. And, you know, like coming up as a young scholar at the time, like I said, I was 22, 23 years old. It's like, oh, this is just hagiography. They're just, you know, doing that whole thing. And then I started to listen to the music more intentionally. And I started to listen to the peoples that had carried that tradition forward in the present more intentionally, which led to a lot of arguments with the elders, like, there's nobody doing that now, right? But there are. And I think that you know, the beautiful thing about what Coltrane was actually doing was that it's not limited to his ability to do it, right? There's a learning curve, of course. He talks about having, you know, there's an apprenticeship, you have to be invited to this, right? You can't just show up the first day and think you can do this, right? And Coltrane himself had to grow into that. But James said that he would go to the shows with his sketch pad and he would sketch out his art while he listened, right? And so Phyllis is one of the most extraordinary, you know, abstract artists. She's more than that to me. But when you look at his work, in that story, is like, oh, that's where those lines and those curves, that's where that comes from. And so that was in 2017. A year later, I took a pad to a show. I'm not an abstract artist, but I tried to do the same thing with words. And over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, I ended up with a collection of that. And so that's what these poems are. These are poems that I listened to first, right? And tried to refract through words. And that's the essence of every single piece. But in listening to the music, I also saw things. And the visual, it kept going back to what I knew to be Black people's spiritual reality. And I tried to capture that. And, you know, what we're going to see in a minute is that reality as filtered through Black Southern culture in particular, because that's where I'm from. You mentioned Orangeburg. I'm from Orangeburg, South Carolina. And, you know, those faith traditions are what they are, but they are also more than what even the people that practice them realize they are. And that's where a lot of what the sound that I was hearing in these musicians, that's what I was able to connect it to. So that was a little bit more in 2 minutes. Are we good back there? Mm-hmm. Keep going? All right, so I'm gonna just start reading. Let's see. And when we are ready to see the visuals, they'll come. You have to trust that the time will be right for that. So I'm going to start. So the collection has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections. And so I plan to do at least one from each section. And so we'll see how that goes. The first one that I want to read is from a section called Holy, Holy. H-O-W. I'm sorry, W-H-O-L-Y. Holy, Holy. And this one is called Anthony Hamilton's Southern Stuff. And it was heard with Liz Wright on October 8th, 2021. Liz Wright's actually here this weekend, so make sure, you know, y'all go check. I'm checking her out tonight. But one of the great Georgia bred musicians, she's a vocalist. And this is heard with her. You got that. Amazing grace. Pentatonic, dusty dirt, road driving. One room church house, no instrument having. Long meter, everybody harmonizing. Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi bread. West African rooted, Detroit, Chicago deposited, bare fingers in the grease, white lily drop biscuit, Sunday morning dinner prepping, put something in your stomach because Pastor finna preach all day, swaying, humming, hooping, because we ain't come here for no show. Mahalia Jackson echoing, Robert Johnson selling, front porch watermelon eating, field piece shelling, thunderstorm watching, sweet honey in the rock, moss tea drinking, crab fishing, blues sweet feeling, South Carolina peach picking, cobbler baking, Texas sound, rock and roll worship, gree carrying, Swiss transition feeling, muggy summertime, nighttime revival, clear sky gazing, lightning bug catching, hole in the wall, fish with the bones frying, light bread with mustard sandwich serving, Pepsi Cola mixed with something extra, grace given, look the other way, law breaking, high priestess of Tryon listening, churchical frenzy, organ riffing, Ray Charles seeing, quiet anniversary singing, you yet holding on, homegoing repass, soul clap, spirit doubling, freedom loving, freedom living, willing ourselves to keep on keeping on them, baby. Southern stuff I like. Some of y'all deep south folk know about some of that stuff, but some of that stuff migrated too. Absolutely, it definitely migrates. And so this is called Still Praise. This was heard with Joel Ross, Chicago-bred vibraphonist, under 30 years old, one of the great young adherents of this sound, who has, I think, taken the music world by storm, but he's just starting. He's only about 4 albums in. And this was a commission that he did called Praise in the Midst of the Storm during the pandemic. So this is the era we were all home and we're listening to music. We're going to shows virtually. And so this commission is called Praise in the Midst of the Storm, but the poem is called Still Praise. How we know, though troubles assail us, to still praise in the midst of the storm. How we know to let everything that have breath, even when they tried to stop our breathing, stop our ghosts, stop them from inhabiting the worlds we made, where the sound of the trumpet, the psaltery and harp, the timbrel and dance, the string instruments, the organs, and where cymbals crash the place with the march down the aisle praise, the gospel quartet two-step praise, the Mississippi blues rhythm praise, where we flood this unholy place with praise from the fruit of our lips, declare the haunting of divine retribution, the promise of a new day, where all will see the gods in us for it's everlasting too late. Where praises go up and blessings come down is not expectation of a transactional give and take or favor ain't fair theological malpractice, but a promise that God is just and Holy Ghost come back. Where we collectively exhale and we loudly exclaim that we believe what cannot be seen yet. How we know we knew that we know what we know what we know. How we knew to steal ourselves, knowing what we know. And knowing what we know, we still praise in the midst of the storm. I think you're ready. And so it's a nice little break. There's a sweet, sweet spirit.
There's a sweet, sweet spirit.
There's a sweet, sweet spirit. Spirit. There's a sweet, sweet spirit. Spirit.
So yeah, I never thought I would be able to do something like that and also show it at Sankofa. Like, what's going on? Right. You good?
Sure, yes. Just didn't trust it earlier. It's okay now.
So yeah, my students often ask me, well, what are you gonna do next after you leave? Because I'm always threatening to leave when they don't read. That's a look at what I would be doing and probably should be doing. Because that's the thing that, writing and, creating stuff. Insofar as the academy limits that, becomes like something that I'm constantly thinking about, doing and pursuing. I want to get this to stay. Any advice, Michaela? How we get this to stay?
Hold it in your hand.
I want to be able
Know
to.
that it's wisdom.
Yes. All right. I'm gonna stop playing. Good. Yeah, I think we're good. As long as where's the feedback coming from? I'm a little bit of an audiophile, so I think if I stay here. All right, cool. Yeah, still feedback. So much feedback from you. All right. So moving on, this next one is from the section called Water, and it is called Faith. And this was heard actually here in DC with Robert Glasper, Chris Dave, and Derek Hodge, actually Alexandria, Virginia, on December 4th, 2018. Truths. Did I lose it? It says on.
I think it might be bad.
Are we good? All right, cool. Truth sounds less dense than the sea. made of that substance that make buoys, that make life vests, that make rafts, that make canoes, that make the oars the ferryman used to rescue us, to rescue a people cast adrift in the ocean, swallowed up in the wake of the sinking ship that tries to drown our faith but can't. Our faith is the substance of things Anna Julia Cooper hoped for. She said, faith means treating the truth as true. This substance made the sound coming from these piano keys, gave it confidence, a firmness, possessed it with reassurance and a boom bap, hip-hop love song swinging to the beat of the faith of our fathers, our mothers. Sprinkle some in this bag, spread it around your house, in the hallways, the door cracks, clean your counter with it, shine your pots with it, dry your clothes with it, leave a little in your pillowcase so you too will know, really know, that everything will be everything. It will float. Thank you. So this next one is really thanking with Christina Sharp, who, among many things, has written a book that I think I love teaching and learning with students with this text. It's called In the Wake, and she uses a concept called residence time to talk about the time it takes for something that's in the sea to fully decompose, right? And we learn in the book that it takes actually millions and millions of years for a thing, its essence, to actually decompose, to go away, to actually not exist anymore, right? And so Residence Time is a poem that I heard with Eric Harland, who was doing a virtual concert on November 19th, 2020. And so this is Residence Time. Submerged in moods, baptized under modal forces, underwater aquatic journeys to restart the residence time of life cycles that join life force with the flow of the deep sea. The ocean floor welcomed ancestors who relived lost cities of Atlantis, whose movement and rhythm drove a frenetic energy, drove the improvisational pull into the water's mood. The plunge breaking down the sonar, alerting those meant to rescue them, thought lost, them who had found residence in the water's time. And so Eric Harlan is a drummer. And just like Robert Glasper, they're from Houston, there's something happening in Texas. And I can't really capture, but they have this really deep spiritual register that animates their sound. And I think there's something to it in the sense that they're all emerging in the late 90s, early 2000s, and carrying this to places, to new heights. And they all play with people who really understand this in its depths as well. They're very selective, but also very intentional about who they play with, because this is so critical. This idea is so critical to them. And so I want to pivot away from the book for a second, because the jazz world right now is in deep mourning, because one of those people who's actually from New York, Casey Benjamin, just made his transition at the age of 46 years old. And so it's been a rough week. And, part of the way that I dealt with it myself was to try to write something. And so this is brand new and, raw. But this is For You, which is the title of one of his compositions, and subtitled A Requiem for Casey Benjamin. Colors, shapes, spaced out advanced trigonometry, abstracted attempts to name a sound for you. For you know by now, your idols are satisfied with the way you cherish the day. Reminded us for all time that all we had to do was say yes and surrender to sound as a bedtime story. Yeah, for you, reminded us twice to let it ride. Let love be supreme. Let it guide us to the festival where there are levels to loving the sunshine. Waking to a morning confidence, knowing that it's going to be all right. With you, we knew. For you, hearts uniting as one was ultimate relation to voice, so coded as electronic transformation, electric divination as teen spirit. For you, who knew music as canvas, as veve, as life refracted, for you became for us. A life with your horn becomes ours to remember. Visions you sounded, ours to paint, to craft, to sustain. Lift off. Time for you to carry our cares and burdens and our trusts to an even higher plane. But dig, just like you always knew just how to be for you, we know for you, the next act is going to be a lovely day. So we're also still mourning in the movement world, and it seems like Dory Ladner would have been here if she were able, and I know she is, but I say that because every time I was in the midst of a project, I could call Dory and talk about it. And so we know Dory as courageous, as, willing to, step into hell to fight for Black people, right? But Dory was an intellectual, right? Dory was a thinker. And it was almost like a litmus test for me to be able to talk about my work with Dory. Is this, academics, or is this like what people want to hear, want to talk about, want to learn about, want to be about? And if I couldn't talk about it with Dory, then I had to reevaluate myself. And so she was always a huge supporter of me, and it's hard to imagine like doing work without her here. But I sat down a few weeks ago and I wrote this, and I call it Monument for Dory. If it were true that people made time for the things we want, I would make time for Dory. More time for Dory's courage. More time for Dory's laughs. More time for Dory's love. More time for Dory's standing up. More time for Dory's fighting back. More time for Dory's smiles. More time for Dory's frowns. More time for Dory's sarcasm. More time for Dory's emails. More time for Dory's chill. More time for Dory's will. More time for Dory's cool. I will make a whole Dory school. But it is not true. We can't make time for everything we want. But maybe we can make more of our memories, more of the time we have to build a love monument for the world Dory wanted. All right, so back to the book. The next section is called Genealogies, and this talks about the relationship that we have, of course, both blood and corporate as Black people to peoples who have gone before us. And the first one that I want to read is called Flame Carrying. And in this particular poem, I am listening to Jason Moran and the Bandwagon. Jason Moran, for the last probably 10 years, has been, I was going to say attempting, but has been definitely carrying the legacy of James Reese Europe forth. And so this poem is a commemoration of that. This was actually at the Newport Jazz Festival, July 31st, 2022. So this is Flame Carrying. You said nobody started a fire like Jerry Allen, and nobody tend flames like the Bandwagon. Working that rhythmic kindling, keeping the tradition alight, the Bandwagon rides through like a flaming chariot, coming forth to carry us, spirit us home. Thelonious fire, Waller fire. It keeps spreading. Then the left hand booms, an eruption. Damn, how that happened? How you sneak dynamite on stage? Blast around the bass lines, we now encased in all this heat, burning fast, now slow. Black people love a 350 degrees oven. Warming us like the Harlem 369th. James Reese Europe warned us that fighting in hell meant fighting great wars over there and at home. Negro music is the Great War, a reimagination of ragtime, recognizing the African roots of war. Hell fighters, hell fighting, meant we return fire, we return fighting. A symphonic march scorches earth, slashes and burns this concept of home, of the brave. This next one is an interesting one too, because it was in connection with my time in Savannah. So I do a writer's retreat every year, and maybe about a good quarter, and maybe more than a quarter of these poems were written there. And I was thinking, of course, about Second African Baptist Church, where 16 ministers met to imagine Black life after emancipation in 1865. And Secretary Stanton and General Sherman asked them a basic question, and that was, what does freedom mean to you, and how can the federal government assist you in obtaining it? And they basically said land, right? Land and guns, essentially. And so, as I was, re-listening to some of these concerts, I couldn't escape the implications of that, and the color blue just kept coming up. And this was actually also heard with Robert Glasper, Chris Dave, and Derek Hodge. And so this one is called Blue is the Color of the Shadow, January 27th, 2018. Relive hip-hop blues that take shelter within shadows of ancestors, shaped into the curve of a love supreme. Linger with the sound a little while, to cast a shadow a little while, maybe dance, maybe hope, definitely pray a little while. Listen as rivers of blue passages flow into port cities, spreading along coasts, extending as an extended lyric, strings riffing like Nathaniel Mackey signifying on 16 bars, 16th notes, semi-quaver, 16 Black ministers meeting to declare desires for families to till blue fields, protected and remade as collective harvest, honest work on lands available to all who need a place. Pray that their children remember the ways the blues wrap their heads around grapevines of gray clouds of witnesses, that their children tend their resting places with blue roses planted along the fields where each generation dreamed of their own 40 acres of blue chords, tugging and pulling, playing bass lines, making the bass line up the melody of Afro blue, which is the word passed, heard in their memory. Blue butterflies offer melodic cross-pollination, a sonic organic chemistry that makes children fall in love. This ain't a sad blues. It's hip-hop tinted, tinctured like the blues first made with hands dyed, like Julie Dash's vision of the past. Like the peasants, young children would hold the ancestors close and wait a little while, because something is coming. A suspended drum roll launches patient reflection into radical expectation. And that's the blues. Whether indigo colored or haint pink, with see-through waters that ripple with the wind, shadows spill grief and loss, resounded as another beginning. And so I'm going to do about 4 more, and they're from the last 2 sections. The first of which is called Spaces. Thinking about this in particular through the lens of where freedom might exist, if not this space, but space. And that, of course, allows us to think about what we do with the space that we have. And each of these poems kind of converge around the idea of reimagining space, but also understanding that space exists beyond what we can see. And so this, what some people will call Afrofuturism, is embedded as well. The obsession with space and understanding space. And so the first one from this section that I'm going to read is called Notes on Kinetic. Notes on Kinetic was actually the first poem that was written in this series when I tried to do what James Phillip did And it is heard with James Francis, who is also from Houston, and he's a pianist. And at the time, I think he must have been either 23 or 24 years old. And Jason Moran, shout out to Jason, also from Houston, who's the jazz director at the Kennedy Center, offered him the space to explore. And at that age, he was given, I think, 4 shows. It was really brilliant. I stayed for, I tried to stay for 2 sets every time I go somewhere, but I knew I was staying for both sets to listen to James play that night. And his band is called Kinetic. And so that's where the Connecticut notes on Kinetic comes from. Part 1, or set 1. Distant, infinite destinations, travels in space, journeys in outer space. These notes on Kinetic launch a North Star following, drinking gourd intellectual genealogy around the sphere of Thelonious, who said, I mean you, and he really do. Dubale. With these notes, we mean to offer spaces to open a reopening to a blues people blueprint, a plan and a map where the infinite destinations to space for exploring the debt and death we owe to ancestors who declared a war against death. These notes on Kinetic created spaces for sound solemnity, structured sedimentation, ground broken up, blues notes planted deeply in fresh soil, a way of seeing and sowing what makes us whole. These notes, resonant, powerful progressions, where fingers leap and sway, swinging and chopping, evoking emotional gravity, elegying euphonic grace. You will realize these notes on Kinetic are electric blues, charged up, activated spaces for dreaming again and again. That continuity, ceaseless stream of consciousness is resolution, not order. Set 2. Out of primeval nothingness came everything. Nothing music is never just nothing. Noon is darkness, void, space. This sound is dark purple, vibrant and royal, herald of creation. Space for prophetic restatements of swing time. Miles ahead of Nardis, our legendary lineage, our unbroken chain ties us to a space to remember. Even as we make new territory, we are buoyed by ancestral reimagination. These notes on Kinetic are straight chops, enigmatic, ethereal restatements. Not a monument, not construction, not a state. Space is noon. Everything required for creation was already there. Sound is a mirror of that fullness, smooth and rounded, completing cycles. Creation as music's ritual practice, round and round. Music's deliberate, emphatic journey around the sun toward the view from the bridge, where we can again see resolution, observe change. Like monks, we inhale the evidence. These notes on Kinetic reveal tone and color, spectral space-time, painted harmony, panoramic rhythm, melody given as speech, the making of all things. Space is not this place. Return us to space as cycle, as relation, as movement. Return us to space as pata satisfied, the repetition of creation, or just beginning again. Constant movement, kinetic energy, sounds that start the world over. So you can hear the connection between my poetry and my politics, and my intellectual and or scholarly work as well, thinking about Black radicalism as the thing that guides our imaginations of the future. So the second poem from this is actually from a virtual concert from 2021, I believe. Yeah. And it's a sister who has East African ancestry, Midwest roots, and was singing and performing in Dakar, Senegal. Her name is Somi, and this is called Sing to Remember. And this was April 21st, 2021. It was also a commission, I can't remember which which museum. But the name of the commission was called The Absence of Things. What can we know of who we are in the absence of things? Stripped bare, left with nothing, denuded, placeless, our bodies exhumed into exile, reduced to breath, blood, muscles. What do we dream about in the absence of things? Of home? A Dakar compound where drum, kora, and guitar conspired with Abby Lincoln's scream, her shout, us moving together round the Kaaba. A place where you knew you could always touch your feet to the floor. To market days full of expectations, spectators in vibrant colors, Ankara draped streets where birds echo the chatter, their music punctuating the air. A whisper, a hiss, an exhale, then a yell, a wisdom instruction. Don't forget to breathe. Catching our breath does not fill the absence. The void is there as marker of space. It is where we stop to consider what we have when we have nothing. Our voices whisper and hiss and yell, I who have nothing. We who have nothing have some things after all. These songs are our holy room. Allahu Akbar. The trees sway in response. We thank them. Use their bodies to craft tools to mirror our voice, the first instrument. Don't forget to breathe. Repeats her mother's instructions. For there is never truly absence unless we forget to sing. All right, so the final section, is probably the one where I sat with it the longest because it's probably, given everything we've already read, the most serious. Because I'm dealing with musicians who are dealing with the concept of healing. And this occurs on a very individual and a personal level. And we know how significant that is for us to consider what it means for us to not only recognize that we all are in need of a certain kind of healing, but also on a collective level. What does collective healing actually look like? And so as I have been doing since I first encountered him, appeal to Kia Kumwande Bunseki Fukiao for a lot of the energy of this particular section. And I'll just read two of the poems. The first is from another younger musician, saxophonist that I'm extremely excited about. His name is Emmanuel Wilkins. And his last album, The Seventh Hand, really converges with some of the themes of this collection. He grew up playing music in church, and his job as a musician was to provide space for the Spirit to intervene in worship. And he translates that into a 31-minute improvisational ending to his latest album, where he talks about how they couldn't stop until they were done. And what he meant by that was he couldn't stop until he heard and felt and experienced the Spirit. And so this poem actually is from a commission that he also did during the pandemic. And I just got to see it live for the first time in New York this past January. And it's called Blues Blood. Sometimes you'll see Blues Blood, Black Futures. And he's thinking about many different things, but certainly about the relationship between the blues people and people who had their blood spilled. Where's the relation? Where's the connection? And this actually, he's now recorded this, and it'll be out soon. But what's also interesting about this is that they're playing music. He's written almost an hour and a half of music, and he actually has a chef cook an entire meal as part of the performance. And as someone who's also very much into food, when I saw that, I was like, oh, I get this, right? And I forget what they made in the original commission, but the one that I just saw, we're in a venue, like a regular concert venue. And there's the chef making gumbo on stage as they play. What's the relationship between Black people's healing practices and Black people's food ways? I think that's something that we should probably think about as well, especially when they try to denigrate soul food as unhealthy, but that's another conversation. So this is called "Come Out," and it's a lyric that there's a moment in the performance where Emmanuel and the other musicians, there are 3 vocalists in a regular quartet, and they start saying "Come out, come out, come out, come out, come out, come out, come out," and it immediately made sense to me. What they're talking about is the trauma needs to come out. Right? They're singing that out, and so I want y'all to think about that as I read. So this is called "Come Out," March 27, 2021. Submit to sound as invocation of blues blood sacrifice. Sound as offering to the spirits, placed in large kettles over fire, victuals piled high on plates, placed under oak trees, buried underneath the ground, provision for blessings. The alto saxophone builds a shrine to a ritual for a Black future. Ancestors, come on out. Come out. The blood run deep, vocal lines run deep, evoking safe passage for gods who need space to sit as they negotiate on our behalf. Saying in memory of those who gave blood, not as nostalgia, but as a mercy. This blues blood is a mercy, and we are everything. We are everything we need. Chant their names, sing their praises. These phrases are for their ease, for their comfort. Sweet melodies, haunting rhythms show us that we've been through what we leave behind, what is promised us. The blues have sentenced us to time served. Come out. The blues blood has blessed the land, has blessed my family. These musician diviners have made the sacrifice. So I'm gonna do one more for the volume and then one more new one, and then we can have a conversation, and then we'll open it up for discussion. This one is called Charm School, and Amethyst Kaya, who came to Howard while homecoming was happening, so I knew I had to escape the nonsense. Here on campus to go listen to her, because I'd never seen her live. And so this was about 2 years ago, October 22nd, 2022. And, as the so-called Texas Black nationalist has taken over the country scene, people like Amethyst Kaya, who have been doing this work for many, 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 many different years, it's interesting to see how now people want to pay attention. But I wrote this in honor of the relationship between her playing, in particular on the guitar, which is, sacred instruments are often stringed throughout the world, right? The stringed instruments are often the most sacred. And also her voice, right? And so this is about her guitar and her voice. These guitars played like charms, amulets, gree-gree instruments as protection from the pain of broken circles and lapsed memories of how to play, which Dizzy said is a form of worship. These guitars have clear paths, clean glasses of water held underneath mattresses, offering second sight for people washed away, for the people who were whisked away. These guitars, broken bottles, shattered glasses for acoustic linkages to times and places where dusty roads and shallow ponds marked territories, new maps for finding God revealed in the troubles of the world. Her voice is a lake house, warmth-filled cabin, the smoke of a doused outdoor hearth permeating the senses, anticipating the utter relief of sustenance that is coming, that must come. Her voice is a holy inheritance given as our common will. The guitar strings, its executor, to make sure we experience care. She sings for us. She sings for old-time ancestors. Her voice insists on the possibility of resolution of our common terror and our minor key pain. It can be called out and measured and examined, can be known and diagnosed. The blues are our secret code for knowing our healing is imminent. These guitars, her voice, invoke time as common experience, history as living through rhythms that never stop. Passages of time sound the same and different. These guitars, her voice face the world and confront sadness, despair, joy, and the melodic fullness of hope. They are the ordinary registers of life, frailty and strength, angst and wonder, a blues mood. These guitars, her voice, offer relief in extraordinary times, times of trouble, intermediary periods, ma'afa. These guitars, her voice, offer menkisi against capitalist modernity, and the colonization of time, memory against the idea of a neoliberal order that declares there is no alternative. These guitars, her voice, are sound as charm, harmony that replaces harm, takes harm back to its proper place. But there is a river. Black sounds are skulls of memory. These guitars, her voice, rhythmic divination, vocal conjuration, are holy implements of love. So this is the last one. Thank you all for persevering. And this one I wrote brand new, thinking about where we are in the world. I have a long poem on Gaza that I won't read unless I really want to hear it.
Really want to hear.
But this one, this one is called Untitled, Are You Sure? And it's after Tony K. Bambara and Aretha Franklin. Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well? Are you sure that your prayers haven't been answered? Are you sure your soul can even be well? Are you sure that exploring your heartache will sit well? Are you sure your well-being is well? Are you sure that whatever is yours to have is well? Are you sure you know what you know? Are you sure you meant to know? Are you sure that your knowledge is knowledge? Are you sure you ain't pretending not to know? Are you sure? Are you sure that your prayers haven't been answered? Are you sure of the words in your prayers? Are you sure your God's care? Are you sure of what you are praying for? Are you sure of why you are praying for? Are you sure we ain't no ways tired? Are you sure there is an other side of through? Are you sure he may not come when you want him? Are you sure he specializes in things thought impossible? Are you sure? Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well? Are you sure we can win? Are you sure what winning is? Are you sure of your blackhood? Are you sure you can make it what we need it to be? Are you sure of your loving, of loving our people? Are you sure these celebrities really ain't terrorists? Are you sure that excellence is a synonym for liberation? That mere representation is a form of Black power? Are you sure these things are our ancestors' wildest dreams? Are you sure you thought that through? Are you sure that the issue is salvation? Are you sure? Are you sure that your prayers haven't been answered? Are you sure that we walk by faith and not by sight? Are you sure liberation can be sighted? Are you sure it is real? Are you sure you can feel it in your soul? Are you sure that if you cross that river, you will study water no more? Are you sure? Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well? Are you sure the beat, the rhythm, the call? Are you sure you are listening to the voices that carry the right note? Are you sure that you are being guided, moved by something greater than attention, fame, and clout? Are you sure that you are open to love and loving? Are you sure you know that these ancestors loved you? Are you sure that their loving means you too must love? Are you sure that you know what your loving means you must hate? Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well? Are you sure that your prayers haven't been answered? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Thank you all. So we're going to do a short dialogue, and then you all can ask us questions. And do you want to ask a question, or should I ask a question?
Well, I want to say that there's a real progression in your poems. That the last poems are the best. Oh. So I want to say there's a real progression in your poetry. That your last poems are the best, and you're getting better and better and better. And that's as it should be. And I think you got some wonderful poems in front of you. Some great poems behind you.
No, I appreciate you. It's a yeah, like I've been saying, can't even find words because it's an honor to share the stage with you, let alone know you, and also you were one of 2 people in the room that saw these before this was a book, and having that experience of you knowing that, or me knowing that you were one of the ones to see this. It allowed me to know that there may be something there. When, as a writer, you never really know. You never really know. Something that I think, there's some scholars in the room, and I feel, the scholar side of me coming, because something you said a few weeks ago at your house is that there's been a relative lack of critical attention to your work from Black scholars. Can you talk about that? Because we do have Black scholars in the room, and I want that to change. So talk about why that matters to you.
Oh, well, I don't know. I've been getting a lot of attention from white scholars lately. I was at a conference in Louisville of mainly it was like academic poets, and there were about maybe 110 people there, maybe, and maybe 7 or 8 of them were Black, and there were people there there was a person who had written a paper on A.B. Spellman from Ann to Ampersand. Wow. And I said, a paper on what? and these people are crawling through the poetry, and they have every right to be, and we put it out there. I mean, it's there to be read. But if Black scholars are doing this kind of detailed work on Black poetry, I mean, I haven't seen it. But then I don't read scholarly journals either, so that might be my fault. But yeah, it's a question of who is on the other side of the poem, and when I make the poems, I don't worry a lot about that because I'm just trying to make the best poem I can make. And but when I turn it loose, I hope it goes home. So I'm perfectly happy for it to go other places, other cultures, other worlds. But I do want it to go home. And I don't know. Maybe if I got out more, I would know that. But I don't get out so much anymore.
Another question I'm thinking about alongside the fact that students are here. What did your Howard experience do for your writing?
Well, okay. Let me make a sort of a side excursion here. The people talk about when did the Black Arts Movement start. I don't think that's a really legitimate question because I don't think that great historic and cultural movements have specific beginning dates and particularly ending dates. And I think that there's a continuum, and that there are ebbs and flows in that continuum. And the Black Arts Movement was a flow, but the Harlem Renaissance never ended either. So when I was at Howard, the Harlem Renaissance was well represented here. I had classes from Sterling Brown. My greatest, I didn't exploit my experience with Sterling Brown as much as I should have. I kicked myself about that all the time, that I didn't do more with him. Because he was a very accessible, very nice and gentle and welcoming and funny person. And I'm sure he would have enjoyed having people who were trying to write at Howard come to him and sit with him and help us out, and would have enjoyed helping us out. I'm sure he would have done that, but we didn't know to ask. So Lucille Clifton was at Howard when I was here, a very great poet. And we had a little writers group, but none of us had ever been in a writing workshop, so we didn't know how to do it. And we should have gone to him. We should have asked him to help us out with that, and he would have done it, I have no doubt. Owen Dotson was I took my only creative writing class from Owen Dotson, who was great out of the New Federal Theater kind of movement before he, and he was a brilliant man, a fabulous theater director. He was the one who told me to stop writing all these abstractions and write what I know. You know, David, you don't really know that. You're trying to fake it, you know, but you don't really know that. Write what you know, you know, and that has stayed with me ever since. When I was at Howard, though, and this was the 50s, and it was the most bourgeois period that probably in Black culture. You know, I think that in the sense that everybody talked about what size house they wanted, what size car they wanted, how much carpeting they wanted to have on floors, and all that kind of stuff, and what kind of formal dances they wanted to go to, and that was mainly the conversation at the school. Then Brown versus Boyd started heating up, and the moot court for Brown versus Boyd was held at Howard. So I was taking a history course from John Hope Franklin. And John Hope Franklin was advising the NAACP on the historical basis of Plessy versus Ferguson, all those other presidential cases. And he would come back to the history class and tell us about it. And he encouraged us to go to the moot court. And I did that. And there was Thurgood Marshall and Spotswood Robinson, James Navett, and all these people arguing the case about separate versus equal, which was a hard lie to tell with a straight face. I mean, I grew up in Jim Crow, and I'm telling you, it was well separate. The separate part, what they had in place, that was working. But the equal wasn't going down, I'm telling you. And I got stories about that, which I will not tell. Well, I mean, I would if we had time. At any rate, but at Howard, being there and watching that, and then seeing how it all worked. And I remember there was a dark-skinned Black man, a lawyer whose name I can't remember, but he did a great Southern patrician accent. He did a great, you know, so he would argue the South's case in this accent. And it was funny, but it was also brilliant, you know. And what Dr. Franklin told us at the end of the trial, at the next year, in the second year I took court history with him, was that the South never thought that 5 Black men and a Jew could beat them in an intellectual competition before a jury of white men. They never entered their minds. And the NAACP out prepared them. That's what it was. So that was for the first time, having grown up in Jim Crow, having been taught white supremacy, you know, which was everywhere in my life. You know, it was in the signs on the street, it was in the law, it was in the social structure, it was in the attitude of my parents when they talked to a white person. It was everything. And then having been taught that I was inferior, and then seeing that they are not smarter than us, which was a real eye-opening thing for me. I was about a sophomore, and that these people are not smarter than us. And we, you know, because we kicked their ass in this. It was like, we knew the historical importance of the case, but at Howard there was a sense of like, it was like Howard had beat Duke in the national debate competition, you know. So yeah, that was that opened up everything for me. I mean, that's I think things like that were the biggest influence.
So yeah, I just have just one more before we open it up to the audience. So I've heard you say this more than once, talking about going back into, the writing of poetry, that you didn't want your epitaph to read, "Here lies an art." Here lies an art administrator.
Here lies Dad. You wrote great guidelines.
There you go. There it is. So can you talk about your evolution as a poet, in line with that, and what it was like for you to go back into poetry full throttle when you did?
Well, the thing, what he's asking me about had to do with my years at National Endowment for the Arts. I worked at the National Endowment for Arts for 30 years. And when I got to the endowment, I was faced with federal conflict of interest rules. And that meant that I could not publish in the nonprofit press, which is 98% of the poetry press, or even give poetry readings at colleges and universities. So I stopped writing. And that lasted about 25 years. But then I had that thought, what you asked me about, where I started saying, well, God, I mean, if I were to die now, that's what my children would have to put on my tombstone, and I don't want that. I mean, I want to be remembered as a poet. So I set about trying to get it back, and it was really, really hard. You can imagine like playing the piano and then stop playing for 25 years and then say, okay, I'm going to have a concert next week. And you get to the piano and you have no chops at all, none. That's what that was like. So it was really hard. So I started doing things that I used to require people who came to my workshops to do. Like I started doing some translations, even though I'm not fluent in any language. I'd get my dictionary, my French dictionary, and I'd sit down with Cedric in French and try to translate the poem just to get back into the inside of the poem. I started writing sonnets to try to get some swings, some movement, and I didn't care whether the sonnets were any good enough. I just wanted to get into imagery again and into rhythm. I started writing songs and I started going to the museums and writing poetic responses to paintings to try to get imagery back and all that. And it was hard work, but it finally started coming. And I finally completed the long poem, and it was, of course, about death. Because that's the universal poetic image. And it gradually came back. And I'm really glad I did that now. As I say, I am actually a better poet and a more prolific poet now than I've ever been in my 88th year.
So, Michaela, how much time do we have for questions?
15.
All right. So I'll keep my answers abbreviated. So we'll open the floor for questions.
Question here?
Yeah. I think we need to pass the mic.
Share this. Let me share this.
Thank you all to y'all both for your readings and what you provided to space today. First of all, this question is for really both of you. How do you feel, or what do you conceive of as like sort of the separation and meeting between like poetic knowledges and like the knowledge that it takes to create a poem, like a knowledge that's rooted in a feeling, and like the knowledges that sort of are provided through like university education, like and what goes on in not compulsory, but the university education process in the social sciences and humanities.
That's Solomon, right?
Yeah, that's Solomon.
I can't see faces. I'm gonna answer with the source. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna answer with a source, right? Amy Cedric, Poetry and Knowledge. His essay where he talks about this, and actually assigned it in a class where I had students read a book that I know you're familiar with, Exchanging Our Country Marks. On Tuesdays, we had a conversation about the historical text. On Thursdays, I had them read Nikki Finney's Rice. And what you saw with that convergence is both areas were enhanced by each other, right? And so had we done just straight like historical study and had we done just straight poetic study, we would not have had the same experiences. And so I'm gonna mess up the quote, but Cedric writes that, poetic knowledge is what grows in the silences of these other forms of knowledge. And that's a great, analogy, metaphor, because that's kind of what, the form does when, as you know well, that academic knowledges can't contain and were never created to contain the fullness of our humanity. And so I go to the poetic because not just is it an escape from that condition, but because there's some things that we need to say that we can't say through the forms of knowledge production that structure the academy. And when we get good at it, right, when we get good at this poetic form, we can now go back into the academy and further destabilize those silences, further undermine those structures. And that's kind of where I'm probably going to go back and write my next academic text in a form that just completely confuses people who are in the academy and expect this, and this, because there's certain ideas that we need to project that are not going to be successfully executed through the form of knowledge production that exists there. And I'm aware of that now as I've been interrogating, these feelings, right? These spiritual traditions, right? I can see it now, I can feel it now, and now I can be able to write it now.
Well, I don't think so much in terms of the question in the universe as having to deal with university education. But I think the question, what you're asking is, why do you write a poem and not an essay? What is it the poem can do that the essay can't do? The poem can speak to the intuition, or what many of you would call the soul. The poem goes there. That's what its target is, at least in my essence. I shouldn't be too universal in this because there's all kinds of poems. There are poems that do entirely that. But basically what poetry, what all art does, it strikes at intuition. It makes you feel the thought before you rationalize it. This is a difficult matter with words. I've always thought that musicians had the best advantage because they communicate with sounds, and you don't have words in front of you, which words inherently go to the intellect and then get broken down so they can reach the feeling. But with the music, it goes straight to the heart. Same with the painting. The painting goes, the eye takes it in, and another part of the mind gets to work with it before the intellect does. And that is the advantage that they have. The poem tries to do what other forms of writing don't do. And the poem then dismantles that intellectual response and makes you feel the word. And that is the difficulty of poetry. That is the hard thing about the poem, because that's where you're going with it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I took it.
Thank you. Yeah, it does.
Okay. Kayla, there's one here.
I'd like to ask Josh to read his poem about Gaza.
It's too long, y'all. It's actually like 20 minutes. Yeah.
So can we get the first 10?
I'll be reading it in Atlanta next week. And what I will do is I will have them record it so that we can share it broadly. So that's the compromise. But it's too long.
Where in Atlanta?
At Four Keeps Books.
Oh.
What date?
On next Friday, the 12th, at 6:00.
Be there.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard the little groan when you said Four Keeps. It's one of my favorite spots in Atlanta. So say hi to Rosa. I hope that you have a amazing time.
Exactly.
Actually, the question that I had. The question that I had was a two-parter. The first part was almost identical to, I think you said Solomon's first question. The second part was kind of about moving beyond academia. I know that you have this background in organizing in social justice spaces. So how do you personally, either of you, or are you in community with scholars and artists who have rituals and who have practices to alchemize traditional scholarly academic knowledge into action and healing for the people?
that last part of the question again?
How are you or people that you're community with alchemizing traditional academic scholarly knowledge into action and healing for broader communities outside of academia?
Oh, I see, okay.
So I'll just say that that's like the one thing that I'm constantly thinking about and figuring out how to do, because I'm in Black Studies, and that's embedded in the mission of Black Studies. It's not just, scholarly work. It's exactly what you just said as well. And so what I realized is that, being in the academy in 2024 is that that's now out of style, in a real way, right? People will say that they are doing that, but not really doing it. And I'm trying to escape that trap of patting yourself on the back when you actually do something in the community, as if it's the point to pat yourself on the back. So I struggle with this because I remember when I was going up for tenure, there was this category called service, right? And service is supposed to be the thing that demonstrates that your work is relevant, beyond just, what you do in the classroom. And somebody had to translate to me that all this community work that I was actually doing should go in my tenure file. Because I'm not doing this for the academy. I didn't do this, and this for the academy. And they were like, no. It belongs. And I'm still struggling with that because there are certain things that are just not in relationship to that space. And so for me, it's at this point, trying to join less organizations because, I don't want to overextend, but being in community with people who are actually focusing on radically changing the world. And so I have to be thinking about Cuba solidarity work. I have to be thinking about Palestine. I have to be thinking about all of this, but also knowing what the routes for my students to actually be engaged in those things actually are. And my approach for the last, 7 or 8 years is to connect them to elders. And that's kind of why I work with the SNCC Legacy Project as a middle person between young people and elders who have this long history, have this long experience, but have not given up, have not retired, if you will. And that's been the best way for me to kind of alchemize, I like that word, to alchemize these particular concerns, because just as these elders are present and still doing the work, our students have no idea that they exist. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, for most of them, is the most that they will know, right? But also, in undoing that problem, we can then say, that's why this thing with Dory is still hurting me, because I could call Dory and say, here's a student, and they could talk to somebody who stood down white supremacy, right? But that's kind of the work, that's kind of the way that I do it right now. And again, Karen Spellman is what pulls me into that work. And, we're actually building courses for the community out of that work. So it's bringing whatever I know from intellectual world to people that actually, I would say want it. Because when you pay $60,000 a year for tuition, that kind of destroys your desire to actually learn stuff, right? And we know that we're in that kind of position in the academy right now. And so who actually wants this is where I want to be. And I find that our elders are in community with those people, and we have to bring our students to that. So hope that's a good question. I hope that answered it.
Going back to your first question, Josh, to A.B. Spellman, because there are Howard University students in the room and writers, and I'd like to ask A.B. to comment on Amiri Baraka and Howard and his relationship. I can remember Amiri saying at Howard, we're waiting on that next book, A.B. And the other person is Stephen Henderson, with whom you had interaction. There's a volume coming out in the fall Ethelbert Miller and 2 other editors, I don't know who they are, on Stephen Henderson, so we're really looking forward. But would you tell us and the young generation here about your interaction with them?
Well, the Baraka interaction is, that's the book there. I mean, that he was, we were very, I was in his circle when I was a student at Howard. And, but that was just basically hanging out. I mean, there wasn't much to report from that. You got to realize that the 50s were a big, I hit Howard in 52, he got there in 51. And the 50s were transitional years. There's pre-Brown versus Board and post-Brown versus Board. And Brown versus Board was like my sophomore year. And then junior year, if you take them to court and the decision years. Baraka left after his junior year, which would have been after my sophomore year, and went to the Air Force. And so our time together was basically hanging out. There was no great intellectual going on in that. And the greatness that we saw from him was not apparent then. It started showing up when he went to the Air Force. And I wish there was some documentation on that. And I wish I had actually made him tell me all about what happened when he was in the Air Force, because there was a big change. I mean, his letters, which I stupidly did not keep, started describing a different person altogether, who had an intellect that I didn't even know he had, and was and had a way of reading and the system of selecting what to read that was beyond anything that I had, because I'm just basically going through the library and pulling books off the shelf if the titles were interesting. You know, but Baraka was reading towards something. Okay, Leroy Jones. So it was during the New York years when he was first establishing himself as an important literary presence, an important playwright. He was going to be our generation's James Baldwin, where the whole system letting one Negro through per generation. He was anointed to be the next one as an angry playwright, and even that anger came from the source that inspired the whole Black Arts movement and inspired the whole youth movement, which was the civil rights movement, the struggle in the South, where people were actually doing something to change America. When you mention Jim Crow, you gotta imagine like a big mountain range of like rock mountains, and taking that and destroying these mountains, taking them down. You gotta imagine the difference between the potential for fascism that we see in the Trump movement and actual fascism, where fascism is the law of the land, where white supremacy is the law and the social structure, and it is real and it is comprehensive. And you got to imagine taking all that down, which was actually what opened up everybody. And nobody who had any kind of conscience at all could not respond to that, could not do it. So naturally then Baraka, who was always a very contemporary person, always into the next thing that was going to happen, changed his way of thinking and of being. And that's well documented. You all know what went down with the history of that. And if you don't, there are plenty of sources to explain it to you. So there was that. And he was in New York, during the New York years. I basically followed him to New York in 1957 and lived on the Lower Manhattan art scene, which was a great scene. I mean, it was like Paris and Montmartre, and the beginning of modernism, you know, where there are all these Picasso and Rock and all the artists are hanging out, and with left people and with philosophers and musicians and composers and all that, and it's all happening. So that the Lower Manhattan scene was all like that. It was a great laboratory and a great way to develop as an artist. But then as as the Black Arts Movement developed, as Malcolm X was the biggest influence on all of us, I think. Malcolm changed thought for all of us. We responded to Malcolm in New York, in the cities mainly, in the urban, northern urban cities, but where the South responded to Martin and Stokely. Stokely sort of straddled both worlds. But all that is to say that it was the force that was in the streets which impelled the Black Arts Movement, because if you had any sensitivity at all, you had to respond to that. You could not be a conscious person in the world and not say, well, damn, these people are actually doing something. You know, when you look at Slick, and these people are going into Mississippi and Alabama. They're going in the counties where no one in the entire history of the county has ever voted. No Black person has ever voted, ever thought of voting, because that's how hard Jim Crow was. And they're grabbing it by the throat and beating it down, and then there it was. So I don't know. So yeah, Baraka's move to Harlem was bold. It changed every Black artist's way of thinking about himself or herself, and the fact that you would and should go to the community and be there, and your art should relate to that. I remember the first time I met Malcolm X at a UN reception, and I introduced myself because he had just left the nation, and I wanted to talk about, well, you know, if you want to open up your ranks, I'd like to work with you, you know. And so he asked, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a poet. He said, so, well, what kind of poetry do you write? And it was that first poem I read about the twist of the ancestral world as well. That's where I'm at. I'm at measure. I'm at, does the line break according to breath, or according to thought, or according to cadence, or I'm working about nuances of form. That's what I'm thinking about. And he's asking me what kind of poetry I write, and this is Malcolm. And I'm saying, well, you know, he said, well, okay, well, who do you write for? And I had never thought about writing who I was writing for. I'm just trying to make the point. You see, so yeah, so I had to go back and get into my Stone and Brown and, you know, and start rethinking this thing, you know what I mean? And that happened to all of us. That happened to all the artists of my generation. I mean, most of us, anybody with a soul. So there's that. And as for Steve Henderson, Steve was a great man. He brought me to Morehouse, where I got James Early kicked out of school. Abdullah Kalimat was here, by the way.
I heard.
So, yeah. He had those two faculty members. One of them stimulated the takeover of the board of trustees of Morehouse, of the Atlanta University Center. Anyway, but Steve brought me to Morehouse on that same trip I mentioned to you, and he was way ahead in terms of academics who were looking at contemporary Black poetry. Steve was way ahead of the game, and was a terrific mind to apply to it. I think that book of essays must be a very important one. I really look forward to seeing it.
And also shout out to your interview and monthly review with Malcolm X.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Hi, thank you both for this amazing work that you've both written. My question is for Josh. So, being a fan of your work, I consider Holy Ghost Key to be kind of a cousin to a Black study. And if I remember correctly, had the Tony K. Rivera section in a Black study and a poem at the end. So I wanted to ask you about being a Cedric Robinson, you know, connoisseur, as I think you are. What do you think of Spirit and the Holy Ghost Key as kind of a rejection of sort of like the modern concept of the human? Like, what do you consider to be the touch between like Spirit, the Holy Ghost Key, and this work in defiance of like modernist concept of humanity and humanness?
Well, I think the easiest way to answer that is to root it in African concepts of the human, which are not divorced from spirit. And knowing that intuitively is to be in community and conversation with the way that we actually live, right? And it's also one of the things that gets either denigrated or misunderstood in, I would say, social scientific knowledge. And with the exception maybe of anthropology, right? So part of what I wanted to do is build a bigger house for that to live in my work, right? It's one way to do it, and because I see like one of the things that I talk about when it came to writing of Black study is that these are not just scholarly models for us; these are ancestors, right? So it's not just like just think of them as people that you cite, or no, these are ancestors. And so talking about spirit is just a bigger house for us all to be in community with that again. And I think the idea for the collection happened when I realized that there was still more to say in a Black study about what you're talking about. And that is the thing that exceeds normative models of study, or the things that are larger than normative models of study. And I can recall writing of Black study, and that was the thing that was sitting on me. It's like, yeah, this is nice, or this is good, but this ain't everything. So yeah. Okay.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm Aurora Harris, and I'm from the board of Broadside Lotus Press that popped in from Detroit to give support. And I just want to shout out, and I'm here with Sister Naomi and my brother John in the back there. We're all from Detroit, but they transplanted here. But I wanted to know, thank you for the poems. We really enjoyed them in Detroit, and I have something for you from Dr. House.
Oh wow!
It's called a book called Medicine.
Yes. Wow.
Yes,
Yes, Gloria House.
Yeah, she's also on the board.
Thank you. Thank you.
She goes to Cecilia.
Yeah, and that goes to see like
Yes.
Yes, really. Which means the comma.
yeah. And so I wanted to know, how long did it take you to put these poems together?
So, when I first started doing this kind of series, or this as a series, I was kind of just guided by some of the musicians that I was following, and then the pandemic hits, and it just gave me opportunity to just be in one place and still go to all of these virtual shows at the same time. Like I had a schedule of shows every day that I would go to. Because some of the jazz clubs, what they would do is they would get their virtual setup, and then they would have a consistent flow of artists come through. And some of them you could pay like a monthly subscription. You would know that there's a show every Monday here, or every Tuesday here, so on and so forth. And so it also, I think, allowed the musicians to be a bit more creative. Like when you have to play for an empty audience, but you know that you can continuously have to play. And they were still getting gigs. And so it was like, what is this producing? What is this moment producing? And so by the time of my writer's retreat in 2022, I had just, I had completed my other book earlier that year. I realized that, because a lot of these shows are archived too, that there is like a bunch of this moment of the music deserves some attention in some form. And so I decided to pick some of the ones that I remembered and went back and re-listened to them. And over the course of the 2 weeks I was in Savannah, I probably did 24 of them. And after that, I realized, oh, this is a collection now. Okay. And that's how it came to be. And I may have written maybe 5 to 10 more after that. But it was in that moment of being in space with other writers and writing every day that allowed for me to actually come up with a full collection. And then at that point, I forget which. So there was a first book prize that reached out to me at one of the university presses. I can't remember. And so I was like, wow, first of all, how do y'all even know me? And how y'all know I have a book? But they had saw my work in Obsidian, and that's how they found out about me. And they realized I didn't have a book yet, and they invited me to submit my manuscript. And I was just sitting on it at that point. And so it just gave me a target, and I submitted it to that particular prize, and I didn't get it. And then I started to look, well, are there other prizes? And I remembered, the Broadside Lotus prize, and I thought, yeah, if there's any prize that I want to win, it's one with the Black press. So it just worked out beautifully like that.
Okay, well, what I want to try to ask, I guess, is, okay, you've been inspired by jazz, and you've looked at these videos, and you've gone to concerts, but as a writer, and I'm asking you this as, one professor to another, right? And where we're constantly teaching, and we're, whatever courses that we're teaching, whether it's part-time or full-time, there's some slowdown in the creative writing process, because I know I worked as a writer, poet for 10 years nonstop. And then when I got into teaching, the whole thing just went out the window. So, so when you're working on getting the ideas for the poem and things, in between the teaching, what is your writing process like? Do you set some time aside?
So I teach 3 classes. I've been teaching 3 classes a semester since 2013 at Howard, without break. And now since 2017, I do summer. So I don't write when I'm teaching at all. Okay. I don't mix. I don't mix. And so for me, it's carving out some very specific time for writing. And like I said, I do the writer's retreat. That's a big part of my year. I get a lot of writing done during that particular time. I also, sometimes I just go away for a week at a time. And especially when I have, that itch, sometimes writers get that itch. Like, nothing else matters in this moment. And that's what I do. I can't be distracted by anything because it won't come. And so that means going away. It means going to places that are carved out for that purpose, right? It's not going to be like, all right, I got some time this weekend, I'm gonna do something on the side. It just doesn't work like that for me. Like, it has to be very intentional. And given the demands of teaching, I try to not to focus on the writing at the same time. Now, certainly, if an idea comes, I'll jot something down. But I don't consider that to be any sense of a final thing. Like, the final product will come when I'm in that intentional space. This is writing time. This is where I do it.
Okay. And AB, you mentioned earlier that there are not a lot of Black scholars that are writing about your work, or most Black scholarly writers or poets, in the United States. So you've got poems that you're sharing now, you've got some from the past. Are you planning on putting out another book or a collection, or letting scholars know where your books and your writing can be found, like in a list of publications or something, and that we can circulate for students to look at and write about?
I have a collection coming out from Wesleyan University Press, and it'll be out October 1st of October. Yeah. And they, I'm trying to get them to make sure that they do point it toward the Black scholars as much as they're able. I believe that they should be able to do that because they published several Black authors in the last years. Calvin Hurton had a prize-winning book, the late Calvin Hurton, a couple of years ago. So I believe that will happen quite well. But I'm certainly it's something I'm going to try to make sure happens.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm submitting to them a manuscript in the next few weeks for a book after that. Based on New Orleans, poems based in lyric narrative poems, long ones based on New Orleans, basically between 1890 and 1925. The Storyville years mainly. I am from New Orleans. You are from New Orleans? Oh, okay. So this will be about your town. Yeah. A very interesting place, New Orleans. Very, very striking cultural expressions there that aren't there. Yeah. Okay, so okay. We go.
Thank you.
Are we done?
Almost. I was actually going to ask you. Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about the forthcoming work, and so that worked out perfectly. So like I said, I'll be in Atlanta on the 12th, but then the next day I'll be back here. We're actually doing an event with someone who probably should have been here today. Matthew Morrison, his book is called Black Sound, Making Race and Popular Music in the United States. It's a brilliant study of ethnomusicology and the ways that Black popular sound shows up in popular culture in ways that are known and often hidden. And so he talks about how capitalism ultimately benefits from our sound and how that works. And I think that's especially important now when we think about what's happening in the music industry. So that's next Saturday at 6 o'clock. Me and him will be in conversation about this work. Any more announcements? Okay, well, thank you so much, Michaela.
I just want to thank everyone for being here, first of all, and here in person and also online. We have a great audience that's been watching and commenting and just saying thank you and how much they're enjoying the program. Thank you so much, Dr. Myers, I know this is your baby. I know it's very precious, so thank you for having me here. Thank you for bringing a legend. Can we give another round of applause? What we do have coming up very immediately tomorrow, we will have Marimba Ani. She's coming for the re-release of the expanded edition of her book, Let the Circle Be Unbroken. Please register for that online. On Monday, we have a free screening of Money Freedom, a documentary that's on the CFA Frank, which is very pivotal right now because of what's happening in Senegal with the president. They just experienced their anniversary of Freedom Day. But look at Sankofa.com, look at all the events that we have coming up. And I'm gonna keep it brief. If you have not purchased your book, please, you can do so by going to the back. And I'm sure Dr. Myers would be happy to sign it. We also have copies of A.B. Spellman's 4 Lives in the Bebop Business. We have copies of Things I Must Have Known. We have one precious copy of The Cricket. So I would go back there right now and try to grab it before anyone else does. Thank you again for being here. Have a good evening. Oh, ready.
Can I do it on the phone?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay.